It's 133 units in Arlington.
Wow, that's exciting.
So
Keep us posted on that.
Yeah, we had one that we were close on. We stuck to our guns, but the guy did not have an exclusive on it, so he ran the property. He took our offer and shopped it, and found another buyer a direct buyer, and matched our offer. And it's like, oh, I'm not suspicious at all, because he was asking 14.75 for a different property, and we offered, it was in Fort Worth, we offered 14.15 because they wanted us to pay broker commission. Oh, I got a guy that paid 14.25, and it's direct to buyer, so I don't have to pay commissions. So anyway,
the joys of apartment acquisition, right? Which is actually one of the things we're going to be talking about today. So well,
if the prices are right, if the prices are competitive, there's going to be a bidding war. So we're trying to get it where it doesn't get out to market. So there's one we're working on in Arizona, and there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 in the DFW market that are not marketed anywhere, that we're trying to get deals on, because they go to market, that will get outbid 100% of those. If they take it to market, we will not buy it, not one of those.
Yeah.
So we're trying to get them to not take it to market.
Awesome. Well, let's go ahead and get started. Welcome, folks. Welcome back to another Rev Real Estate Live. These are our free weekly educational webinars on apartment investing. So whether you're looking to invest passively or become an operator, there's information to be pulled from these webinars. Now, with that being said, we gear these education webinars more towards a person that is looking to passively invest. And the reason being is because whether you want to passively invest or not, you've got to know some of the basics. You've got to know, you got to have a foundational understanding of how these apartment deals are operated and ran. So during these weekly webinars, we like to pull the curtains back a little bit and share with you a little bit about things that our team does and things to look out for if this is an asset class that you're interested in investing in. So every week we have a topic that we like to focus on. And really what we're going to be talking about today is how to be an effective passive investor, and some things to look for and things to really understand. So I got my handy dandy whiteboard here. You'll see me using this quite a bit because it helps me, one, gather my thoughts and gives you a visual. I'm a very visual person, so just listening to someone speak all the time is kind of difficult for me. So I like using the whiteboard so you have a reference. You could take pictures, screenshots, whatever you want to do. We are also going live on multiple social media platforms. If you have questions throughout the webinar, please ask them. And what you can do is, as that question comes, just type it into the chat box. And if you're watching this live on social media, feel free to comment on the live video, because our assistant Hillary is monitoring that as well, and she can relay those questions to us. And we're going to do something a little different today. After I get started, there's 4 things we're going to be talking about today. Number 1 is some common myths that people have when it comes to apartment investing. So I want to share what 3 of those are. And then we're going to talk about the why. What is your why for wanting to get into apartment investing? And then we'll talk about the how, which is the process. And then the what is the specific actions or the specific things you need to do to make sure that you're making a wise investment, and just to better understand what happens in this asset class. So the thing that we're going to do a little bit differently is, after I review these myths, I actually want to know what your whys are. And in previous webinars, we haven't opened it up to commentation and things like this, where we ask a specific question to the audience. But I want to know that, and I think it's good for you to review that as well. So if you're on the webinar with us, I'm not going to ask for volunteers. I'm just going to ask for a few people by name if they wouldn't mind sharing. And if you're not comfortable, that's okay. Just say, I'd rather not share right now, and we can respect that. But I think it's important and a powerful exercise to do, because a lot of us are here on this webinar today for some reason. There's a reason that you're here. So hearing what other people's whys are, I think, can be a very powerful tool to help you gain clarity on really what it is that you're hoping to gain from investing in apartments. But with that being said, let's go ahead and get started, and we'll jump into some of these myths. And again, if you have questions in the meantime, then feel free to go ahead and put it in the chat box. Oh, real quick, I need to do a shameless plug. our podcast that our team's been working on for quite a while just launched yesterday. So it's called The Millionaire Mind, a journey into the mindset of successful business owners. Unlike this webinar, it's actually not an apartment investing or real estate podcast, but we focus more on what goes on inside the mind of these successful business owners, and we interview them on the show. So that's my shameless plug. I love it. If you went to search for it, rated it, reviewed it, shared it, it means a lot to me. We've spent hours connecting with some very, very successful entrepreneurs and business owners to get into their minds and ask them about their story and their journey. So there's my shameless plug for our new webinar. So excellent. Let's get into our myths. So number one that I want to share, and listen, these myths, these are ones that I personally experienced before I got started in apartment investing. So some of these you might already be aware of them, some of them you may not be, but these are the ones that I wanted to share because as I've talked to people, it's a common misconception that I come across quite a bit. So number one is that apartments are owned. Should have wrote this out first. I'll just say a rich person or a large institution. I'll abbreviate there. Myth number one, apartments are owned by a rich person or a large institution. I remember before I heavily got involved in the real estate, driving past these massive communities, knowing that they cost millions of dollars. And I always thought to myself, like one day that would be awesome to own a property like that. And in my mind, that was going to be in my 50s, 60s, after I've lived a successful life, had a successful business, and I had millions of dollars that I had to put somewhere. That was just my belief. I didn't know what I didn't know. And I also knew there was large institutions like banks and insurance companies and stuff that would funnel money into this. I did not realize that I could be an owner of these properties much, much sooner. So myth number one is that apartments are often owned by private equity groups. And private equity groups and firms are made up of people like us on this call. We pool our money together and we take down something much larger than we could on our own. And then we put in management. We effectively manage that asset. We put out a business plan and we do all that. And the beautiful thing about this is that people can get involved and actually have apartment ownership much, 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 much sooner for a fraction of that millions of dollars that might be required to take down that deal. So that's myth number one I wanted to touch on. Myth number two, which I just kind of touched on. I'm just going to do a bunch of money signs here, right? You need millions of dollars to be an apartment owner. To an extent, yes, there is truth to that, because if you're buying a $10 million property, you might only get bank financing for, we'll say 7 million of it. So where's the other 3 million coming from, right? That 3 million comes from private equity groups. So you don't need, the property needs millions of dollars to purchase it, but the way these deals are structured is that investors will come in and they'll buy a small percentage of the entity that's purchasing that property. So you personally aren't putting up $3 million. A lot of groups will do a $50,000 minimum investment. So for as little as $50,000, you can get ownership in the property that's buying that deal. And you're pooling that money together. And we actually have a really cool webinar on that, on what I consider the good, better, and best investment vehicles and strategies. And that's going to be coming on in a few weeks. So keep an eye out for that. So myth number two, you don't need millions of dollars to get into apartment ownership. And a lot of people don't know that. And that's what our mission is at Rev and for these webinars, is to educate people on that, because you don't know what you don't know. So you don't need millions of dollars. You can get in quite often with significantly less. All right, myth number three, and this is a big one that we're going to be spending a lot of the rest of the webinar talking about. Myth number three is that you have to do it yourself. There is so much that goes into not just taking down these apartments, but raising the capital and managing the asset, building relationships. There is so stinking much, so many moving parts, things happening simultaneously that absolutely cannot be done by one person. And so a lot of people don't get involved because it seems like this monster that they just have no idea how to start taking down. What actually drew me to apartment investing as I started learning more about it is that it's 100% a team sport. And I grew up playing team sports. So maybe that's what resonated with me. I don't know. All the sports I played basketball, I played lacrosse, I played soccer. You might have star players. You might have the what do they call them? Like the first pick, all stars, whatever on your team that definitely help. But in those team sports, everybody plays a specific role. And then when they come together collectively, that's how you win games and championships. It's no different in apartment investing. Everybody on this call right now, I'm sure has a unique skill set, has a unique strength that they can apply directly to apartment investing. So when I realized that I didn't have to do all of this and that I could actually and need to have a team around me, I actually felt more supported. And it felt much more realistic to be able to take down something that 10 years ago, I would have never even imagined that was something I could do. So myth number 3 is that you have to do it yourself. You can't, period. You have to have a team. So connecting and finding those team members is vitally important to be successful in this space. So those are 3 myths that I have that I personally experienced, and I'm sure a lot of people have experienced as well. Bruce, I'm going to put you on the spot here because I know you like to talk. Before you got started in apartment investing, what was one of the myths that you had about getting involved in this space?
That you had to have deep pockets and high net worth, and you had to be wealthy to buy them.
Okay. And I love that you brought that up because we're gonna come into that. And a lot of us probably feel the
deal we
same way.
bought, we rarely put money into our deals. We're on our 21st project, of which all but maybe 4 were syndicated in some way, shape, or form. And we actually, I take that back. We have one that Ben and I did on our own. So that feeling. And then also the other thing that was the biggest barrier was these brokers use their own language, like what did it trade at? And they have all these phrases that they use that are unique to multifamily. And I just refuse to play their game. I still say, I still use street terms, and it kind of bugs some people in the real estate world, but I do it for fun. I break it down to very simple terms. But that was probably another barrier, is just the terms they use were so foreign to me.
Yeah, I appreciate you sharing that. So those are some myths, and there's a lot of them there. So if you ever have questions about it, feel free to reach out, because oftentimes our team has probably already experienced it, or we know somebody that has. So we're happy to walk you through and help you reframe and better understand really what it takes to get involved with these deals. So I want to take a minute now before we start talking about the how, which is the process, and then going into the what. I want to hear what some of your whys are. I want to hear what that is. And for me, like I'll start and share with you mine. I've shared my story a lot. A lot of you have heard it. Some of you probably have not. I come from the medical field, and I was working that safe, secure job. And because of a traumatic leg injury, I was almost completely out of work. And at the time, I was trying to provide for my wife and my kids, and I was almost out of work. And that scared me to death. I was working what I considered was one of the safest, most secure jobs, and I've never felt so insecure and financially fearful in my entire life. And that's what jump-started my journey into real estate investing, because I knew if something like this was to happen again, I wanted to be set up for myself and for my family to be able to weather whatever storm that was. So I got into real estate investing, and we started with a couple fourplexes. Fast forward 2 years, I'm out mountain biking. I'm really good at breaking bones. If anyone that knows me well enough, you know that I'm great at breaking bones and I like doing dangerous things. Fast forward 2 years from injuring my leg and fracturing my leg, I go over the handlebars mountain biking. And when I tucked, I came down on both elbows and I shattered both of them. I mean, my right one was the size of a softball, and I'm sitting at home for 3 hours icing it, telling my wife it's not broken, it's just bruised, because I'm in denial of the whole situation. But we go to urgent care, we get an x-ray, sure enough, they're both shattered. And what ended up being what they thought was going to be a 4-hour surgery under anesthesia was an 8-hour surgery under anesthesia, and about $35,000 later. 2 weeks before that happened, that decision I made to get into real estate investing and purchasing those fourplexes, we just happened to sell one of those 2 weeks prior. So I had more than a year's worth of income sent in my bank account. So that experience that I experienced that first injury around working that job that I thought was safe and secure, I didn't have to worry about that the second time around because of the decisions I made to get into real estate 2 years prior. And I realized that is my why. And it reconfirmed to me that I was making the right moves for myself and for my family to ultimately set us up for success and give us more flexibility and give us some more freedom. And one of my big dreams, I want to circumnavigate the globe on a catamaran with my family. That's what I want to do in 5 years. That's one of my fun whys. So I want to hear what some of yours are before we get into the boring how and what of apartment ownership. Robert Clyde, why don't you share with us a little bit about what your why is, if you're open to that?
Sure, absolutely. So two of my biggest whys. Number one is my children. I'm a single father of triplets that are 20 years old right now. They're going through college and they're starting their lives, and I want to be able to hand them something that's going to be worth something someday. And I don't want them to have to chase the rat race of the W-2 that I did for the last 30 years. And the second biggest thing is that I did it for 30 years, the W-2, and I got a good retirement, but I know in 10 or 15 years, that retirement is not going to be worth anything. The money I'm pulling today on my retirement just isn't going to be worth anything in 10 or 20 years. And I won't be able to survive. I won't be able to maintain at least what I have right now on a retirement.
Appreciate you sharing that. Trevor Da Silva, I don't think we've had the pleasure of meeting before. If you're open and comfortable, would you mind sharing what your why is?
Yeah, I wouldn't mind. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Yep.
Perfect. Well, my main why is my 3 children. I've got 6-year-old twin girls and 12-year-old son. And what kind of ignited my reasoning for wanting to find other ways to make income other than a job was I had a really amazing job. I mean, I still do, but I had lost it at one point, and I thought I was secure, going to retire with these guys, and it just kind of shattered everything for me and kind of woke me up a little bit, I guess, and was like, man, you've got to have some other kind of income or something coming in if you're going to make this work for the future of yourself and your family. And so I've dabbled in a few different things, network marketing, Amazon FBA, and I'm just trying to find my niche, I guess. And so I know Paul Karchner. He was a missionary, actually. He's the reason I got baptized in the church. But anyways, and so I follow him, and I've seen him post this stuff a little bit, and I decided, you know what, I'm going to get on this morning and just check it out and see what it's all about. So
Well, I appreciate that.
Paul's
an all right guy. So.
Yes.
Awesome. Thank you. Steve Cochran, are you comfortable sharing what your why is?
Sure. It's been said the children, and I think we all want to leave a legacy, and that's definitely one for me. But really one of my biggest, and this, might sound weird to some, but one of my biggest is so I can serve the Lord a little bit later in my life to still be able to have an income. I'd like to go on a mission with my wife at a younger age. And so one of my big whys is to be able to establish passive income flow that will still provide for for me and my family, if at that time.
Thank you for sharing. I don't think there's anything weird about that. I think that's a very, very powerful why, having that goal and that desire a few years from now. So thank you for sharing.
Yeah, you bet.
Amber, what about you? We'll do one more if you're open to it.
Sure. So mine is my children as well. I have a medically complex son that had a kidney transplant when he was 5. He's 11 now. And kidney transplants don't last forever. So that is something that I just want to have financial stability and kind of like a just peace of mind to be able to give him a bigger life and to kind of take some of the pressure off in the financial side of things so that we don't have to worry about that part.
Awesome. I appreciate you sharing that. Do you guys recognize a common theme here with the people that we asked? And I just picked them randomly. I didn't even ask them beforehand if they'd be open to sharing. So I definitely appreciate you allowing me to put you on the spot like that. For those of us that have families, that can be a very, very strong why. And some of us may not have families, and that's okay, but there's still a reason we're here today. So before you ever get started investing in apartments or anything, right? Like we talk about apartments, that's our preferred vehicle of choice. There's so many different ways to make money, okay? Before you make any move in that direction, you've got to know what your why is, because things will never go as planned. They won't. That's just life. That's business. That's investing. Things won't go as planned, but having that clear why and knowing why you're doing this definitely helps make it a little bit easier getting through those tough times. So appreciate you all for sharing that why. So going back now, getting more involved into the apartment investing side of things, the how. Now, the caveat to this, here, let me write these out here. So I broke this down into 4 simple steps of the how or the process. So number 1, you've got to source the deal. And then number 2, you got to qualify for the financing. And then number 3, you got to provide equity. Ooh. And number 4, you got to manage the asset. This is one of the traps that I've personally experienced firsthand. There's a lot of mentorship groups, and I'm not trying to talk bad about them, because there's a lot of good that comes from them. And I know people that have been very, very successful joining these groups. However, you go to these 3-day events, they get you all hyped up about apartment investing. And they're like, look, it's as easy as 4 steps. All you got to do is source the deal, get the financing in place, raise some capital, and then manage the asset. And I feel like it's, in a way, a little dishonest approach to apartment ownership, because there's people with no experience coming into the space, which is okay. Like a lot of people have started from no experience, but now they're investing all this capital to be a part of these groups, thinking that it's as easy as these 4 steps. And then they get into it and they're like, whoa, this is not at all what I expected, and a lot more difficult. And there's a lot more moving parts going on. And I thought this was something I could start as a little side hustle, when in reality, it's a brand new business. It's a whole new business and a whole new venture. So the how, I mean, really, it can be as simple as this, right? You got to find the deal, you got to qualify for financing, you provide the equity, and you manage the asset. And it's easy to fall into the trap of, oh, okay, yeah, I can do that. I can do that all on my own. But myth number 3 is that it has to be done on your own or by yourself. And I told you it can't. So what I often found is that these areas are typically taken on individually by different groups. And then these people come together to then purchase the asset. That's supposed to be a square window, and it looks like a triangle, okay? What we're going to talk about next is the what. and some of the specific actions. And even in our limited time here, I'm not going to be able to get into all of it, but we're going to be talking about the what of each one of these things. And so you don't have to do it on your own. And this is not only knowing your why, but having clarity on who you are and what your strengths are. Now, there's often times where people don't even want to mess with this. They like the idea of real estate. They connect with operators that are doing very well, have a track record, they trust them, and they just say, hey, here's my money, I want to passively invest, and that's okay. So, but you still need to understand what's happening behind the scenes, and that's why I'm breaking this down for you, okay? So, for example, at Rev, we focus on point number 3. We've done all 4 simultaneously. And we were running around like chickens with our heads cut off. And it was just a lot of work. And that sometimes that's the case. And we just didn't have the team set up right now to effectively manage all 4 aspects of deal acquisition and getting into apartment investing. So what we decided to focus on was the capital side of the business. And the reason being is because, one, we like connecting with people. We really do. I'm very passionate about education. These webinars are new. We started these a few months ago. 2.5 years ago, we were doing monthly meetups covering the same stuff. But since it was only once a month, we couldn't get into as much depth as we can on these webinars. So I really appreciate you taking time out of your day today to tune in and to listen to us, because this is what excites me. This is what I really enjoy, because this is stuff that I wasn't taught. This is stuff that I didn't know, that I had to learn on my own. So I appreciate you being here. Now, there might be other groups that are really good at sourcing the deal. Now, there might be other people that have the net worth, that have the liquidity, that have the financial backing to qualify for the financing. And that's what Bruce mentioned earlier. That was his myth that he shared, that I had to have all this money and this net worth to be able to purchase these deals. You don't. Somebody on your team does, right? And then other people might be super organized and have really good systems and processes in place, and they might manage the asset. They may not be actually managing the property itself, but you've still got to manage the managers. You've got to know what the property managers are doing day to day, week from week, to make sure that they're helping you and your team execute the business plan effectively. So managing the asset is 80% of the job. It's 80% because you're going to hold this asset for 3 to 5, maybe 7 or 10 years. And if you don't have a good asset management process or team in place, that business plan is going to struggle, right? So that's what I want you to get from the how is like, yes, these are the 4 most basic steps, if you will, but you personally don't have to be involved in every single one. Now, each one of these in itself can be a full-time business. Ask me how I know, all right? Again, if you don't want to deal with any of this, that's okay. That's why there's companies and people like us at Rev that help educate and help you make wise investment decisions in apartment investing. So before I move on to the what, any questions about this that I just went over? I don't see any in the chat box. Excellent. So let's talk about the what. And what we're going to do now is break down each one of those points and talk about some of the aspects there. Okay. All right. Sourcing the deal. The number one way to source deals is through broker relations. And broker relations takes time. I believe we talked about this actually a couple of weeks ago on another webinar, is just the time and the experience that it takes to build relationships with brokers. So you got broker relations. And the reason being is because brokers are in the business of making money, and they don't make money, they don't get a commission until they sell a property. So you could call up a broker, ask them for deals. They're going to start asking questions about you and your team because they're trying to determine if their time is best spent with you or with another potential client. So broker relations is more than just calling up a broker. It's having all your ducks in a row to be able to establish yourself as a credible source for potential deals. And this takes time, because it's no different than us working with investors and partners. Like, you need time to build that trust and rapport with each other. And you've got to have that track record. So broker relations, a lot of it is just being consistent, following up with them, asking the right questions, providing them information on what they're looking for. One of the biggest mistakes that you can do when trying to build a relationship with a broker is they will send you a deal. If you ask them, hey, this is our team, this is who we are, this is what we're in the market for, do you mind sending us deals? They will send you deals. The worst thing you can do is not provide any feedback on that deal that they send you. You might underwrite it and it doesn't fit your criteria, and that's okay. Provide that feedback to them. Don't ignore them. You got to provide that feedback, because then they better understand what you're looking for, and it shows them that you're actively involved. And you say, hey, we're going to pass on this deal. This is why. And then maybe they know something that you don't know. And so that's where the conversation, that trust can start being made. So you got to source the deal, broker relations. Then you also have market analysis. Before you get into a deal, you want to know that it's a strong, healthy market that you're investing in. So at Rev, there's 5 metrics that we look for. We look for population growth. We look for household income growth. We look for household value growth. We look at job growth, and we look at the crime rate. And there's specific metrics that we follow before we decide to go into a market. And even once you're in that market, like in Phoenix, there's places in Phoenix, there's neighborhoods here that I want to invest in. So it's more than just pulling up on a computer and looking at statistics. Like, you've got to go there. You've got to visit. You've got to have people on the ground to really know what's happening in a more micro scale in that area. So you got to do the market analysis. Then you also have the deal analysis. Underwriting a deal is so much more than plugging and chugging numbers. I'm going to say that again. Underwriting a deal is so much more than plugging and chugging the numbers. Anybody can plug and chug numbers. There's really no skill set to that. There's so many spreadsheets out there, and it tells you, hey, put annual rent here, put insurance expense here. It really doesn't take that much skill. And people jump into this game thinking that, oh yeah, I can analyze deals, I'm good with Excel. You're missing the point, and you're missing the boat, and you're going to get yourself and your investors into trouble. Successfully and effectively analyzing deals is understanding what the numbers mean. What's the narrative and what's the story behind the numbers? And being able to look at it, be able to break them apart, be able to know what questions to ask the seller, to ask the broker, so that you get a good picture of this property, not just how it's previously been managed and operated, but what's your plan moving forward? What's your pro forma moving forward? Deal analysis is so much more than plugging and chugging the numbers. And for people to get really comfortable in this space, I've seen it takes them often, I'd say 12 to 18 months to really get comfortable in knowing how to vet these deals and understand what the numbers mean. And that I'd say that's like the preliminary level of being somewhat qualified to underwrite these types of projects. And these are people that are underwriting all the time. So that's another aspect that goes into it. And while you're doing all this, you've got to be building relationships with other partners or co-GPs, because you might find the deal and this might be your strong suit, and that's great, but you may not have the financial backing. You may not have the investors lined up. and you may not have the ability to effectively manage that asset. So finding the deal is one thing, but you've also got to be building partners with the people that can help you take it down. There's another myth out there that I should have added to this, but it's more specific to this. Some of us have probably heard it before, but it's, if you find a deal, the money will come. If you find a deal, the money will come. I'm telling you, that is crap. It doesn't work that way. Maybe in some other asset classes, I've heard that it's pretty common in single family, and maybe because a lot more people are aware of single family investing, they're aware of flipping houses. It's all over TV. So maybe there's a higher level of comfort. And so maybe it's easier to raise money that way. When you're talking about apartment buildings, you're talking about multi-million-dollar buildings that aren't being flipped in 2 to 3 months. It's 3 to 5 years. So there's a lot more education. There's a lot more relationship building that has to occur in order to be able to raise capital for these types of deals. So building that co-GP relationships is essential, along with knowing how to analyze the deal, how to analyze the market, and building relationships with the broker. Do you see how this can easily take 30, 40 hours a week for multiple people? Right? This is one aspect of the deal. Any questions about this? I don't see any in the chat box, so I think we're going to keep going. Number 2, financing. We'll get through these a little bit quicker. Okay, in order to finance these deals, so these deals, yes.
Sorry, I was outside, so I had to unmute or muted. I have a comment on the deal side. When you're finding the deal, it's also very important to find the story of the seller and find out really why. There's a story to every project, like you said, is a business in itself, but it's also a story. There's a story there that's being told about what's going on with the property, what can be done, what the history is. And that helps to sell and to pitch to the investors, because the deal, if you have the deal, the money doesn't come. You have the deal, you have to fight for every single last dollar, right? But if you have a good story to tell, it helps to really get the emotional, because everybody's going to invest in emotion. They say they're objective. It's impossible to be 100% objective. Every decision is an emotional decision. So the more you can get into the story, the more fun the capital raise is.
Absolutely. And no operator, I've said this plenty of times, I'm going to say it again, no operator is going to show you a deal that the numbers don't look good at. They'd be the worst like deal pitcher ever if that was the case, right? Like no operator is going to show you a deal that the numbers don't make sense at. So you've got to understand.
As Joel Block says, my performa, I'm getting so good at them that even I believe them.
I love that. And I quote Joel Block all the time. He said, I got so
awesome.
good at underwriting that even I started believing the numbers. Okay. So you've got to know the story. What's the story of the operations team, the general partners? What's the story of the property? Where are they taking this property? Like that's really what you're investing in. Okay. The deal itself is just the vehicle. And I want to stress that, right? So that the deal itself is the vehicle. You're really investing in the operators and the partners and the market and the story, right? Thank you, Bruce. Appreciate those comments. So transitioning over to financing, these deals are almost always bought with financing. Like hardly any of them that I know of at this level are paid for in cash, because being able to leverage the returns and get the most out of the property using finance can be a very, very powerful tool. That can be a very powerful tool. So in order to qualify for these loans, and again, these are rules of thumb, these are going to adjust depending on what's going on in the capital markets. But you've got to have a net worth of typically equal to or greater than the loan amount. So if you're going in to get a $10 million loan, you've got to have a net worth of $10 million or more. Let me back up. You don't have to have a net worth of $10 million or more. The general partnership team has to have a net worth of $10 million or more. So if this is something that you're interested in getting involved in, start asking and wondering, asking around and connecting with somebody that can fit that requirement. and that is open to signing on the loan on your behalf. Okay. So you got the net worth. Then you also have liquidity. This is a big aspect. The liquidity is how much cash does the team have on hand? And again, general rule of thumb is that banks like to see 10% or more of liquidity. So if things were to go south on that property, they know that that team can infuse some cash to make sure that the debt service is still being covered. So a $10 million loan, $1 million in liquidity. Okay. And I need to mention that this doesn't have to be one person on the team. If there's, for simple math's sake, let's say there's 5 general partners on the team and we each have a net worth of $2 million, that would qualify. That would satisfy. Does that make sense? So it doesn't just have to be one person. Oftentimes it is, because there's somebody that just they've been investing for 20 years, right? They've got a net worth of $50 million and they can get ownership on the team simply by signing their name while everybody else is doing all this heavy lifting. There are partners out there doing that. So it's just a matter of finding them. So you got the net worth, you got the liquidity, and then you have the record. And by the record, I mean like history, borrowing history. There's certain loans out there that you can't go and get first time around. You have to partner up with someone that already has experience borrowing from those lenders. And banks want to know that you're a lendable person. So the more of a track record you can bring to them, and the more money you could say, hey, look at how much money I borrowed over the last 5 to 10 years, and we've returned all of it. We never missed a payment. That's going to make you marketable. Okay. So sourcing, financing, let's jump down to equity, and I'll cruise through these. So, because we're running low on time already. So equity, the one thing I have to say to this, can you guys see this blue okay? I'm not sure how it's coming up on the screen. Okay, I'll try to push a little harder, make it a little darker. So equity, the one thing I would say to equity, and this was probably the most profound advice that I ever heard, probably about 1.5 years ago. You don't raise capital, you attract it. And when I heard that, my mind completely shifted on the equity side of the business, because then I start asking myself, like, okay, what do I need to do? What do we need to do as a team to set ourselves up to attract capital? When you're attracting capital, it's coming to you. When you're raising capital, you're going to other people and you're asking them. Right. And I think that's why a lot of people get turned off from this space, is because they don't want to feel like salespeople. They don't want to pressure their friends and family and say, hey, I got the deal of a lifetime. Come check it out. Right. But it's so much more than that. You're not raising capital, you're attracting it. And I feel like that's really influenced who we are as a company, because a lot of the things we do is to build that trust and to educate and let people know that, hey, we can be a good partner and a good resource for you if this is the space that you're interested in. So don't raise capital, okay? Don't raise, attract. Okay, so what goes into that? Number one, you have to identify who your investor is. And this is in any business, right? Whether it's apartment investing, or you have a software company, or a home service, a plumbing company, a roofing company, it doesn't matter what business you're in. You have to identify who it is that you're trying to serve, who it is that you're trying to help. And so that's the first step, is gaining clarity on what those investors look like. There's investors that love apartments, and there's investors that wouldn't touch them. There's investors that love retail and hospitality, and there's investors that wouldn't touch them. There's investors that only do single family flips, and they won't do anything else, right? So you've got to understand what type of people invest into projects like this. And that takes time, and it takes relationship building, and it takes conversations. So you got to identify who the investor is. And then I mentioned this already, you've got to build relationships. You've got to be meeting new people every single week. Every single day, every single week, you have got to be meeting new people. So it takes time to go out, to connect with these people, to get to know them, to see if what you have is something that can serve them, that can help them. That takes time. Having that machine that enables you to create new relationships every single week. Because a lot of people, when they get started in this game, they'll go to friends, family, and then they're tapped out.
You guys gotta love technology when it works and hate it when it doesn't.
Am I back on?
Yeah, you're good.
Hey, all right. I have no idea what the last thing you heard was. Quite honestly, I don't even remember what I was really saying. I get on these little rants. So we'll how long did it cut out for? About 30 seconds. I saw Justin's comment.
Yeah,
It was just a few seconds.
Okay. I don't remember where I was at. Okay. And the point I was trying to make is that you've got to have a machine. You've got to have ways to bring in new relationships, and you can't just exhaust. You're going to exhaust your friends and family super quick. So what mutually beneficial ways are you connecting with these potential investors? And then you got to nurture them. Like once you bring them in, what are you doing to nurture them? What are you doing to keep them front of mind and seeing what they're up to, seeing if their situations change? Maybe they're not ready to invest now, but they expressed interest in 3 to 6 months from now. If you don't talk to them for 3 to 6 months and you're like, hey, Bruce, 6 months ago, you said you were interested in investing. I got this deal. Do you want to jump in? How is that perceived? It's like, I only care about Bruce because of his investment. That's not the way you build relationships, and that's not the way you nurture. It takes a lot of time, and it's more than just the investment, right? Like, do I know Bruce's family? Do I know what that his family went on vacation a couple of weeks ago? Did I ask him how his trip was, right? I know Bruce is big into mountain biking. So like it's really getting to know people on a personal level, okay? And then educate. I mentioned this. Education, I'd say, is probably the number one thing that we focus on at Rev, because we feel like educated investors become the best investors, right? Because they understand what we're doing. The transparency is there. They understand, they see, they recognize, oh, okay, yeah, I remember Dallin talking about this, and this is why that's being done, right? It's so important to us to be able to educate people on this matter. And a lot of it, people aren't even aware of. They don't know that this is even an option. People will think about getting into real estate, getting into apartment investing in their retirement, when they could literally get involved this week or next week, and they don't realize that. So that's why we're really fond of education and just letting people know what they don't know. So you got the education, you got the network. Okay, the network and networking kind of goes along with the finding new relationships and nurturing. You've got to build that network. One of my favorite things I like to do And it's always about providing value. That's really what it is at the end of the day. And one of my favorite things I like to do is, because this is our team's primary focus, I connect with a lot of people. And I'll be on the phone talking to someone, and they'll say or express something that they're interested in that I just spoke to someone yesterday about. So I'll just make the email introduction. And it's as simple as saying, like, hey, Steve, I was just talking to Robert yesterday. He mentioned such and such. I know we talked about this the other day. I think it would be mutually beneficial for you guys to have a conversation. I don't know where it's going to go. Nobody knows where it's going to go, but those connections can make such a big difference. And you could be getting involved with somebody in a partnership in real estate just from one introduction. So we're a lot closer to it than I think a lot of us realize. So building that network. And then I just touched on this, providing value. Okay. Sharing and presenting an apartment deal, an investment opportunity, is not how you provide value. And I know that that might sound a little backwards, okay? But I hope you understand from what I've just talked about as to why I'm making that claim. Okay, the investment opportunity, yes, it can provide value financially to that person, but in the process of building a relationship, before somebody even decides to invest, you've got to be providing way more value to them before that investment opportunity is ever presented. And think of it this way, okay? Think of any good adventure movie of an explorer or somebody that's on an adventure. You have the hero and you have the guide, right? I like using the example of the Karate Kid. Okay, it's a classic. Everybody's seen it. You got Daniel LaRusso, the new kid in school, getting bullied, and then you got Mr. Miyagi. In the Karate Kid, the hero is Daniel LaRusso. The guide is Mr. Miyagi. Any business that you're in, as you're building relationships with people, you are not the hero. You are the guide to the hero's story. You are the one that's identifying what their needs are, what their strengths and weaknesses are, and helping them along their own journey. Now, in our situation, it often has to do with financial freedom. It often has to do with family, right? There's a reason, there's a why people are getting involved in this. And if we can better understand that and help people see how this vehicle can help them, we are the guide to their own story, to their own journey. And oftentimes that's flipped. A lot of people in this space want to put themselves at the hero and be like, hey, look at this incredible opportunity I'm presenting to you. Look at me, look what I'm doing for you. That's backwards. That's so backwards, okay? So if that's the area of space you want to get involved in, hopefully you have a better understanding of what's required. Holy cow, we got 2 minutes left. Okay, I'm going to rock through this last one. So managing the asset, this is often talked about last because it's one of the last steps in the process. However, it's 80% of the business plan, right? It might take you 3 months to acquire a deal. Once you get it under contract to close, it might take 2 to 3 months. You're going to have to manage that for 3 to 5 years. So your asset manager is probably one of the most important people on your team, okay? So they're not only vetting, but also firing, I'm just going to put PM for short, property managers. Most operators aren't managing the properties themselves. Some of them do have that in-house because they weren't happy with their property managers and they're large enough that they can justify taking that management in-house. Oftentimes, they're using third-party property management, okay? So the asset managers are managing the managers. They're vetting them and firing them as quick as possible. Because if you do not have a good property manager on site that's effectively fulfilling your business plan, you're going to get behind schedule. So these asset managers are doing that. They're implementing the business plan. Okay. And they're implementing and executing, I should say. Maybe those are the same thing. And then managing renovation schedule. This is a big one because a lot of these value add deals that our team gets involved in and a lot of apartment investors get involved in are referred to value add. So they take an existing property, they improve the value, and then they sell it. That often requires heavy renovations. My business partner, Jim, and I sat down with an operator that we're looking to partner up with a couple of weeks ago. This month alone, they're doing 178 unit renovations. 178 unit renovations in 1 month. Do you think they've got to have a pretty effective system in place to be able to manage that? Absolutely, right? So people that are extremely organized and very good at executing can make really good asset managers. You also got to look about or consider the accounting, taxes, and yes, there's incredible CPAs like Justin Jensen that can definitely help you out with this. But as an asset manager, you're in communication with the CPAs and accounting, and you have to understand how the numbers are flowing and making sure things are being reported accurately, because this is the stuff that's being reported to your investors. And you want that full transparency there. Which leads me to that next point, is investor reporting. Just because an investor invests with an operator doesn't mean that they're done, right? Or that they're satisfied. If think about it, right? If you were to invest your capital and you never heard from that operator again for the next 3 to 5 years, you'd kind of be wondering what was going on with your capital, right? So there's a lot of investor relations, reporting, and management that happens within the asset management phase. Now, those that focus on the equity and the investor relations, they're going to be involved heavily with this as well, especially if they're the ones bringing capital to a deal. So that's why we've chosen to focus on the equity side at Rev, because we're able to connect with these people and provide the most diversification to our investors and be that third party, if you will, to be able to help them and be that middleman between the manager, the financing, the sourcing, and being able to be an additional resource to them. So as you can see, there's so much work that goes into acquiring these apartment deals. If you want to pick one area, stick to it. If you want to do all of it, you better have a big team and have patience and be willing to invest capital and time, or you don't need to do all of it. You don't need to do any of it. If you like the idea of real estate and this just resonates with you, then you can find operators and people like Rev and other teams that can invest this capital for you. But at the end of the day, it's up to you to be educated. So that's what I have for today. I apologize for going over a couple minutes. I'll blame it on my batteries dying in the microphone. But definitely appreciate you all being on. Before I shut this off though, and we close out for the day, if there's any questions, I'd love to hear them. I'd love to be able to answer those for you. If not, we'll just go ahead and wrap things up. Excellent. Folks, thank you so much for tuning in to another Rev Real Estate Live. If you are not in our investor portal, that's one of the best ways to know about upcoming deals, see some of the deals we've participated in. That doesn't mean that you're ready to invest. We still need to get on a conversation and have a phone call with you just to make sure the alignment is there. So if that's something you're interested in, you can go to investwithrev.com and get signed up in our portal. And Hillary was actually on top of it, and she actually just put that link into the chat. So if you're not already in our portal, it's absolutely no commitment to invest, but it gets you into our system. One, so we can remain compliant with the SEC, and two, we just want to make sure that there's alignment there if this is something you're interested in. And maybe now's not the right time, and that's okay. But we still invite you to come out on our weekly webinars. We keep providing education and information like this every single week. I'm also going to throw out my shameless plug again for our podcast that we launched yesterday, The Millionaire Mind, where we interview successful business owners, just so you can see how other people, successful business owners and entrepreneurs, think and the challenges that they were faced and overcame. So it's a lot of fun. And Amber said that she listened to it yesterday and loved it. So appreciate you tuning into that, Amber. And I'm really looking to grow that. So if you do like what you hear, if you like an interview, leave a comment, rate it, like it, share it, because that means a lot to me. But with that being said, folks, again, thank you so much for coming out this morning. And I think Jim has something.
Alan, I do have one last thing. So if you guys are signing up in the portal, expect someone from our team to reach out to you. Please respond to them. In order for us to verify you in the portal and for you to be able to see deals and activity that we've got going on in there, we have to have a conversation with you. So someone from the team will be reaching out if you signed up for the portal. If you don't get back to them or don't respond to them, then we can't verify you in the portal, and we can't start building that relationship, which the SEC requires. So,
And I mean, we want to build a relationship with you anyways, but
well, absolutely, but we can't let you into deals in the future unless we have documented. And part of our process is to have that first initial conversation and then ongoing relationship building with all of our investors. So we have to have that first initial conversation with you. So if someone on the team reaches out, please get back to them.
appreciate that, Jim. And he brought up a good point. We're regulated by the SEC. We're not some just willy-nilly company out there winging it, right? So we are regulated by the SEC. So there's compliance and things that we have to follow. So some of you are already in that portal, and we've had some incredible conversations, and I look forward to having more of those with you. But with that being said, folks, again, thank you so much for coming out, and we'll have some more content out next week. So keep an eye out for that email. And we also have a live event. If you are local to Phoenix, we have a live event coming up March 30th. We're going to have probably over 100 people there, all focused on real estate investing and apartment investing. Wouldn't surprise me if it's more. We're still 3 weeks out when we already have over 55, 56 people that are planning on attending. So with that being said, again, guys, thank you so much.